All right, everybody, welcome to an extra from the Drummers Education Network. I am Bart Robley, and I am here with a good friend of mine from Colorado, from Highlands Ranch, Colorado, Robb Heskett. Now, Robb, hi, Robb, how are you? First of all, let's start with that. How are you, buddy?
Doing good, Bart. It's really good to see you and to be able to take part in the Drummers Educational Network and an interview as such.
This is going to be great. Now, the thing about Robb that I want everybody to know is what we decided to do in the Drummers Education Network is we're calling these extras. So what we did was we have our normal meetings that we put up and we just talk about drumming education things where we're talking to other drum teachers and we come up with different subject matter where we want to help drum teachers, right? And then we do the interviews, and then we're doing these extras, and we decided that we wanted to just do one-on-one interviews with some friends of ours who are drummers. Now, Robb is an amazing drummer. He's in Highlands Ranch, Colorado. I'm originally from Littleton, Colorado. Robb plays in a John Denver tribute band. He plays in a calypso band. He plays in worship teams. He's an amazing drum teacher, but most importantly, Robb was my very first drum teacher at a place called Crescendo Music in Littleton, Colorado. So Robb, basically everything here, this is all your fault. This is all your fault, 100%.
Well, not exactly, Bart. It's partially your fault for signing up.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, I think your mom signed you up for drum lessons so she could get rid of you for a half hour one day.
You should probably ask your friend, hey, can you give this kid lessons for like 2 hours a day?
Yeah, can you just let him hang out at the store for like ever?
Never leave. That is so great. Yeah, Robb was my very first drum teacher at Crescendo Music. Now, you know what, Robb, Crescendo used to be over on Santa Fe, right? Originally, it was on Santa Fe where it became Littleton Honda. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you're right. So I'll give you a brief history or synopsis of how I acquired it. I grew up with that store, and I think it was probably around when you were growing up in Littleton. I had spent some time out in LA, living in Hollywood, kind of kicking around, trying to make the big time like you did, and eventually ended up back home. And I went down to that music store and was teaching some drum lessons. And I said to the couple that had owned it forever, I said, why don't we start stocking some drum sets in here? Why don't we, sell some stuff? And like 2 days later, the owner said, would you just be interested in buying the whole store? So, and I'm like 21 years old or 22 years old. I'm like, okay. So
No.
anyway, I did. I bought the store and just kind of moved forward from there.
That's awesome. And then you eventually, well, okay, so it was on Santa Fe, and then you
Right.
moved down off of Littleton Boulevard, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And how long was it there?
I had it there about 8 years before I jumped over the counter and went to work for Command Music as a distributor.
Right.
The guy that bought Crescendo after me kept it going for, I don't know, another 15, 16 years.
And you and him are still business partners, am I correct?
Yeah, we're more musical business partners than anything, but that's absolutely correct.
That's fantastic. Now, talk to me a little bit before we get into the teaching thing. Let's talk a little bit about what it is that you play, because you're a teacher, you're a player. Um, you've done pretty much everything, recording. You play on worship teams. So talk to me about like some of the bands, like the John Denver tribute band. I know this year we talked a little bit because COVID, a lot of stuff got pulled. But what's touring like with that band? How many shows a year? How precise is the show? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, I got involved with the John Denver tribute show about 5 or 6 years ago on a recommendation. They had just finished a show at Red Rocks, and unfortunately I missed that one. But they were looking to find a percussionist and drummer. The guy that had been playing with them was primarily a rock drummer, which doesn't exactly fit that genre of music as well. And he also lived in Texas. So
Oh, wow.
every time they booked a show in Colorado, they had to fly him up here and backline his kit and et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of how I got involved with it. Just a recommendation from the actually from the sax and flute player,
Oh, wow.
and it's really a lot of fun, Bart. We do mostly concerts. This is not like a club band or a bar band. We do concerts, uh, conferences. We mostly play theaters that can seat anywhere from 500 or 600 up to 2,000. And it's a lot of fun for me because I actually do both drum set on some of the songs that need that, and then I have a percussion station where I'm playing congas and wind chimes and wood blocks and triangles and everything that kind of fits into that genre of music. So I kind of toggle back and forth between drum set and percussion when I'm playing on that show.
Man, that's fantastic. Now, on that show, how many people are in the band, and how close is it to like the original recordings and stuff like that? How close do you guys get it?
Well, John Adams is the name of the guy that does this John Denver show. He's actually from Holland. Believe it or not,
Hmm.
John Denver's music was hugely popular in Europe, as it was worldwide, really.
Yeah, right.
It was a surprise to me on the first tour we did over there how much people knew John Denver's music. They knew the words and they knew everything about him. Um, the band, when we tour, is about 8 or 9 pieces. We've got piano, a saxophone, an auxiliary guitarist that also plays some pedal steel and fiddle. We have a standalone fiddle player, bass. Of course, I said obviously I'm on percussion and drums, and sometimes a backup singer or two. It just depends on the show.
Man, that's fantastic. Now, okay, so now let's jump off of that one. Now, you play in is it a calypso band? Is that what you do as well, or an island type of music?
Yeah, I guess. Well, a lot of island music is the calypso rhythm,
Yeah,
right?
right, right, right.
I would say we're more of an island tropical duo with a reggae background or flair to it. So we do a lot of Marley, we do a lot of Buffett, we do some Beach Boys, and we do a lot of traditional island music that comes from the Caribbean islands and Cuba and Puerto Rico and et cetera, et cetera. A lot of those we just do instrumentally. But I'm having a great time with it. Again, I use my percussion station, which is congas and toys and wind chimes, and I took up the steel pan, which is very traditional and, as you know, island music. So that's been really cool. We're having a lot of fun with that. It's called the Mango Brothers. And
How many Mango brothers are there in the
just me and
band?
Smitty.
You and Smitty. There you go. There's two brothers. That's great. Now, do you guys play just locally around town, or do you tour with that at all too?
Yeah, it's been more of a just around Denver and country clubs, private parties, concert events, things like that.
That's great. That is
Yeah,
fantastic. And then and a lot of worship stuff too, right? You play a lot of worship stuff.
I do, Bart. I am, I guess you would call it a rotation drummer because worship teams tend to have multiple players at two different churches in the Denver area. The biggest one is Riverside, which is right downtown by the Mile High Stadium, and then a little smaller church out on South Broadway, which is in Littleton,
Cool.
called South Fellowship.
Very cool. And we have a mutual friend on that team. You play with Jeff Missick on bass, right?
Yes, we do.
Yes, Jeff's a monster bass player. I played with him a lot back in the day. Monster bass player.
Yeah, I was surprised the connection there, but not really. Musicians tend to travel in different circles, if you will. And all of a sudden, Jeff and I were talking one day, and your name came up, Bart Robley, and yeah, 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 that's great. So that's kind of a cool connection.
Yeah, it is. It really is. That's so much fun, man. It was really cool when I heard you guys were playing together, and Jeff's just a great guy and stuff like that. Now,
Yeah.
so the way you and I met is you taught me to play drums, and I still remember working with you at crescendo music, you had a little blackboard and you'd write out quarter notes and half notes and whole notes and stuff. You always had me tapping my left foot and into the traditional grip thing and stuff. I also remember working out a syncopation with you. And
Okay.
so on the education stuff over the years, um, how has your teaching changed from back then? Because I know my teaching has changed so much over the years. How has your teaching changed from way back then to now? What is it that you teach, and what are like the main things that you try to focus on with your students?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bart. If I backed this conversation up even further, okay,
Okay.
from when I was taking lessons, right, drum lessons, I never took lessons on drum set. I either rode my bicycle over to my drum teacher's house, and we played through the Haskell Har books, basic
Ah.
snare drum books, and we worked on rudiments. And it wasn't really even until later that I got with some other teachers and started doing things like you mentioned, syncopation, stick control, and eventually drum set. I studied more jazz than rock, but obviously, rock is kind of where it's at in so many ways. But my teaching today, having moved forward, I really feel strongly not only about stick control, but I feel strongly about rudiments. And I like to try to approach it that way with my students. You really need to learn some fundamentals. You need to learn some basic stick control and some rudiments. Maybe not all 40 rudiments, but hey, let's pick the top 10. And get busy with that.
Right.
I really like to emphasize reading because I think reading is so important. Whether they're just a kid that's still in school band, at the middle school level or maybe high school. He may not need it down the road to play in a rock band, but if he gets a studio gig or a gig with a worship team or somewhere, he's just required to read. He needs to know and understand what do those notes mean. When I see that groove, that beat, or that fill, do I get it? Do I know what it is? Can I play it? Can I interpret it? So I try to emphasize that, and I know that this will go out to several teachers, a lot of teachers, hopefully. You do get those students that they don't want to learn how to read.
Yep.
They just want to learn how to play, and so you kind of have to approach them a little differently if you're teaching them songs and so forth, and communicate it differently. But foundation-wise, those are the things that I really try to emphasize: fundamentals, technique, and reading.
I appreciate that so much. That's one of the things we had, one of our topics that we talked about, and you can see all the videos. This one as well, you'll see on YouTube, and it'll be on Facebook and social media outlets. But um, was we talked about reading and why is reading important? And I remember you telling me that. I remember, being young and you telling me just that. Look, you may not ever need this, but you've got to know how to read. And so I tell all my students, look, if we were going to go take a Spanish class together, right? You're not going to tell the teacher, look, I just want to speak Spanish. I don't want to read it. They're going to look at you like you got two heads. You've got to know how to read. You got to know how to interpret this stuff. So thank you for saying that. I think that's great. Well, so you said something about you have some students that maybe they don't want to read, they just want to play in a rock band. So you approach that differently. Do you try to still kind of pepper in some reading with students like that, and how do you approach that if somebody says, I don't want to read, I just want to know how to play Green Day, whatever? How do you approach that?
Well, it's like, okay, so we're learning a song, right? We're sharing headphones, and we're set up my studio to do that as your studio. And they're kind of learning by rote in that sense. They hear it, and then you got to stop and you got to show them really what it is. But again, that's where I wish that I could instill the reading in them, because I can communicate it so much easier, so much quicker. So you kind of spend more time demoing, if you will, or actually playing the part and seeing if they can mimic that or play it by rote. So it's harder. The things that I do still try to pepper in are some stick control and some rudiments. Here's the one thing I've learned, Bart, about teaching songs to students is this: if they do resist the whole reading thing and want to learn, really what's going on, technically, there's a lesson or two or three in every song. So like there'll be this part in the song where they're coming up and they got to do a nice 16 note fill and might have some kick drum underneath it, some quarter notes, and they can't do it. And so that at that point, I'm able to sort of, I don't say, hey, I rest my case, but hey, you see what I'm talking about now? You didn't want to work on that, but you got to be able to. So we'll start working on 16 note fill patterns until they get their 16 notes up to speed. They could have done it before, but now it's kind of, they've hit this roadblock, right, where they need to work on something new.
Right. And you know what? And this is part of the Drummers Education Network. I'd be remiss if I didn't plug this. I reached over in my drawer when you said that and I grabbed his book. Rick, one of the founding members, he wrote this book, and this is actually the volume 2, How to Build a Drum Groove. And you know what? I'm going to talk to Rick and see if we can send you one of his books. He does this amazing thing where what you just touched on, where a student, they don't necessarily want to learn how to read, they just want to learn how to play a groove. But if you can show them how to read one groove, a 4 on the floor. Okay, you play a 4 on the floor, and then in his book, he's like, here's how many songs you can play using just the 4 on the floor. Then he builds the fills in from there. And that's and yeah, knowing those fundamentals, knowing the fundamentals of, groove, time, and feel. And I think for me, like you said, peppering in, okay, if you would have known how to play the 16th note, now you would have known how to do this. Is that a point where it's good for you to jump in and go, okay, let's just work on some 16th notes now, and then you show them how to read it maybe, and bring out some 16th note patterns or something?
Exactly. And we talk about how to approach playing them. You're using too much arms. You need to use more wrists. Work on their grip, and we just work on trying to get it more even, more steady, and faster.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, when do you go ahead? Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over.
One thing I've noticed, well, here, I'll just sort of make a joke, not really, but I'm going to write a drum book someday, Bart, called Everything That's Not in Drum Books That You Need to Know. You want to help me co-write that or underwrite it?
Sure, man. Let's do it.
All right. Well, I had to throw that in because it will come out someday. But anyway, there's just certain things that drum books don't get to soon enough,
Yeah.
And I don't care really what book it is. There's so many great books out there. But the other thing about 16 notes is that you got to be able to play the accents, and the accents are what breathe life in, or rhythm into what would ordinarily be boring 16 notes. So, they struggle with that. They struggle with accents, and it's not, again, their fault. It's up to us as teachers to lay that out there and help them with that as well. So anyway.
Well, that's great. Now, what about rudiments? When you talk about rudiments, how do you approach the rudiments with playing? I mean, where do you start? Matter of fact, I remember you were my first formal drum teacher where my mom was, okay, here, go take drum lessons. And she would take me over there and drop me off. But I had one drum lesson before you with a guy that she worked with, and he taught me how to play 5-stroke rolls. Now, I remember coming to you, and you made the 5-stroke roll correct. And I really remember that. All these years later, I remember you really thinking right, left, right, and then rotating it and showing that to me. I was like, oh, I got to go with both hands. That still is one of those, I guess, light bulb moments, and it stuck with me all these years. Like, oh, well, I've got to make my left hand work well too. And you were so into the traditional grip thing back then, and I don't know if you still are. But how do you approach that now? Do you still approach it the same way where it's like, look, you want to make your weaker side as strong as your dominant side? How do you do that?
Oh, absolutely. And eventually I did get away from traditional grip, although I could still play it because I grew up with it, right?
Yeah.
But our weaker hand for most right-handed drummers obviously is the left hand. So you have to work on balancing that out with not only the height of your strokes, but the attack and so forth. So but I mean, I teach rudiments all match grip these days. Most of my students don't get introduced to traditional grip unless they're in like drumline at school, at the high school level, or
Yeah.
percussion pit, and then they kind of learn about it. And then they come in and they go, well, here it is. And I go, that's not it. That's not it.
Yep.
It's their idea of it. But I mean, there's really one really good and right way to play traditional grip. But anyway.
That's awesome. I remember that well. I remember I remember you taking, okay, hold your stick like this. Now go like this. Now, that's awesome. That's great. Now, what made you switch from traditional to match grip? Just out of my own curiosity, what made you make that jump?
Yeah, I think it just sort of like was like osmosis. At some point in high school when I was playing in rock bands, I just flipped it over, and probably saw other guys playing that way too.
Yeah.
But I still use traditional grip. Actually, I use traditional grip probably more in the John Denver stuff. It's a lighter touch, it's a lighter feel, and although it's not jazz, it's not swing. I don't know. To me, it feels good.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I'm so thankful for all that stuff that you taught me using traditional grip, because I know a lot of guys that um, they don't play traditional, and there's been, I mean, countless times in my career where they hire a band in a place where they shouldn't have hired a band, and they want you to entertain, but they don't want you to be heard. They want you to just be background music. And
yeah,
100% of the time, I always start with, okay, I'm going to go to traditional, and then if that doesn't work, then I'll go to, hot rods playing traditional. And if that doesn't, you kind of stair step it down. But I've always there's been a lot of club gigs that I've done where you're the band and they want you to play like a band, but they want, especially in casinos, we want the volume down a little bit, so I'll get in traditional and play in the center of the head. And that's all from you. I mean, that's all the stuff that you taught me. And I
yeah.
think about it much and all the time. And so I'm so thankful for that. Um,
Well, that's so cool to hear, Bart, because that's a long time ago, and I don't really remember all of what I was teaching back then. I just remember I had my pad set and probably a pad and had those books available and what knowledge I had. So that's good to know that I was basically on point back then as well.
Well, yeah, and you know what? I think that being a teacher, I think that for me, and I can't speak for you or any other teacher, but speaking for myself, one of my favorite things is when somebody does come up to me and I maybe don't recognize them and they'll say, "Hey, are you Bart?" Yeah. Well, you used to teach me drums over here at this place, and
Oh yeah.
I love that. I mean, do you get that?
Yeah, occasionally. Occasionally I do. And I've stayed in touch with a few students that have, actually graduated and gone on to college, or they come back to Denver and they want to do some touch-up type lessons and things. And they share what they're doing in a band or orchestra and so forth. So that is real rewarding to know that some of your efforts and through the years has actually moved on, or moved through you. Not everybody sticks with it, obviously.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think that music. I often say that music in general is just the most important gift that we've been given. I mean, it's there at every moment, good or bad in your life. There's always music and always a song playing, and as a teacher, connecting with students, and even if it's a great hobby for them, it's something that they will remember. And hopefully you make a mark. So anyway, so let's jump on to the present day. You have Two Cobb Drum Studios in Highlands Ranch. This is at your home, correct?
Yes, this is a home basement studio.
Awesome.
Uh, I like teaching out of my house. I don't have to hang out, so to speak, at a music store waiting for students to not show up. So yeah, I really like it. I suppose if we had time, we could pan around, but I've got a xylophone and marimba set up over in the far
Yeah,
corner.
show it to us. Let me see it. Let me see it. Grab your phone. Show me the studio. I want to see it.
We might be able to do that. I'll just pick the phone up. I've
Oh
got it all.
yeah.
You see that over there?
Yeah.
Okay, and this is a full set of Musser Vibes
Wow.
over here. The aquarium in the window well.
Yeah. That's awesome.
That way, when I'm sitting there teaching, I can dream about where I would rather be.
Well, don't you do you have to take the fish out in the wintertime, or do you just let them freeze in there?
I just let them freeze. No, Bart, it's a poster.
Yeah, I know. I was joking. I could tell that.
Been
That's
in Southern
great.
California way too long.
Right? Exactly. That is great, man. That is fantastic. So that is great, Rob. So Two Cobb Drum Studios. Now, what's it say on your banner? Here, you got to get out of the way and show everybody what it says. I love that. It's on the T-shirt. Look at that.
I adopted this slogan: "Good drummers are always learning,"
Isn't it
and
the truth?
it should be. It should be. I feel that teaching over the last 15 years since I've been back at it has helped me as a player in so many ways. I don't know if it's just through the fact that we have to communicate so much to drummers, to students, how to play and what to play and when not to play. But I've actually practiced what I preach. And I think I've learned a lot uh, about myself as a player and maturing as I've gotten older through teaching. So really, I don't think we ever stop learning. If we do, we might as well hang up our sticks, right?
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree with that, and I think that I agree with what you just said too. I know that teaching has made me a better player. I had the great opportunity to study with Ralph Humphrey for probably about a year.
Ooh,
Yeah.
wow.
Oh man. And I learned so much from him. And I mean, here's like one of the greatest drummers in LA, and he'd put you through the ringer sometimes. But I learned so much from him. And then at the end of the lesson, he would always say, "Oh yeah, being a teacher makes you a better player." And this is coming from him. I think that that's just so important to realize that as you're teaching, you're also growing, and I think that that's important to realize. So, all right.
Oh
In
yeah.
closing, how would you? You go ahead and enlighten on that. I'm sorry, I cut you off. What were you going to say?
Now, I was just really going to reiterate and agree with you. The one thing I was going to say is I won't say that technically it's made me like a more outstanding player. Like I haven't gotten from this level to way up to here, but it's made me a more aware player. So
Oh,
if I'm thinking about a fill that's coming up or the timing or just what I'm doing in a groove and where it's fitting in with the music, those are the things that I was going to say. I think it's made me a better player.
yeah.
I haven't become this phenomenal, Neil Peart protege through teaching, but I've taught his songs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, to that point, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that's important because I think that what you said a second ago. You practice what you preach, and that's what I try to do. The drummer's job is to be the guy that holds the band together. I mean, that's your job. And how many times a day throughout a day of teaching do you say that? But then when you get on the gig, you have to remember that. Okay, I'm not here to play a drum solo. I'm here to play the song, or in a recording session, same thing. I'm here to create the foundation for this song and hold the band
Yeah.
together and this person's having a little bit of hard time with the time, so I need to give them more of something or less of something to hold it together.
Well, I'd have to say one of the questions I get asked the most from students of all different ages and abilities is, well, hey, do you still count?
Oh yeah.
And I answer that. I say, yes, I do in very important situations. Like if it's a break in a song or there's a cutoff and there's a 2-beat break or whatever, or if there's a section where I'm playing through an instrumental and I need to know where the end of that is, yes, I am still counting. And they go, oh, really? Yeah, absolutely. I really do emphasize counting, but I like it when they ask me that question because I can honestly say, yes, I do. I can't just guess at everything and get lucky and know where I'm at, right? So
Hey, yeah,
anyway,
you've got to land it. One of my favorite things when people ask me about counting is this is a book that I'm working out of right now. The Charlie Wilcoxon Modern Rudimental Swing Solos for the Advanced Drummer. For the Advanced Drummer, or for the modern solos, it was written in 1941.
Right, right.
Right. And in 1963, he drew this self portrait in the back of probably, well, obviously one of the reprints of himself talking to a drum student.
Uh-huh.
Right. And I mean, yeah, I get that question a lot too. Do you still count? Do you count all the time? It's like, yeah, it's always, rule number one, never lose one. You got
Yeah,
to know where you're at.
or at least
Right.
know where one is.
Yeah,
That's funny because
exactly.
I have a Charlie Wilcoxon book sitting over on my music stand. It's a snare drum rudimental book, but yeah,
Yeah.
some of that stuff is still good. I don't know if you looked at a recent copy of George Lawrence Stone Stick Control,
Yeah.
but there's a whole bunch of endorsements in there inside the front cover or something back cover. And I have my original copy. I think the price was $3.50.
Yeah.
That's printed on that book, but it's still valid today, man. If you can get a student on board with stick control, whew,
Oh, man.
you're, you're definitely moving them in the right direction.
Stick Control is still the best selling drum book of all time, written in 1943. And
Right.
yeah, yeah, just an amazing book. And I've gone through that first, it was page 5, that first page. I've played through that a million times and I still haven't gotten it right. I mean, talk about always learning. You're always, oh man, I missed that one. I could have got it a little better. And that's where you sharpen that sword a little bit. And I think that's what I at least I try to pass that on to my students. So,
Well,
Rob,
as
it's
you
been.
touched earlier, again,
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
stick control helps balance out that left hand control too, because you don't just do your go-to patterns. You got a lot of things to emphasize the left hand, so it is very helpful. All right,
Do you feel that that's like one of your the stick control book? Is that one of your go tos?
it is.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then what
More
about
so than,
syncopation?
well, I know. I've got syncopation sitting right over here on my shelf. Some of the books that I use, the drum books, deal with eighth note rests and quarter note patterns, and so I hope that we get through that enough that I wouldn't have to take a student through the whole syncopation book. Both
Oh
you
yeah.
and I did, and I'm glad I did because I still think my reading is pretty sharp today based on going through syncopation. And
Oh
I
yeah.
noticed a while back you had posted something about using that against the swing pattern, and I also did that as well. That is a great book for working left hand independence against the swing pattern. You did very well with that, Bart.
Thank you. Actually, I thank you. I remember working. That's why I asked about syncopation because I remember specifically working. And I don't know. Again, I don't know why I remember this. Kind of probably the same reason I remember the 5-stroke roll with you, but working on one en, 1 en, 2 and 3 and 4 and ta ta ta. For some reason, that rhythm for me when I was younger, it was just like, I fought that one, and I remember working on that with you out of that book.
Oh,
And
good,
so
good,
yeah,
good.
yeah.
All
Well, Rob,
right, man.
this has just been a real treat for me, and I thank you so much. In closing, and before I wasn't trying to cut you off or anything, I just wanted to, but in closing, what would be your advice to drum teachers out there trying to make a go of it and trying to make a buck as a teacher? What would be the number one piece of advice or two pieces of advice you would give to people out there that are drum teachers?
Hmm. Well, I would say, just off the top of my head, that's one of those questions where you kind of want to think about your answer a little bit. um, you definitely have to be diverse. Uh, with not only today's music, which doesn't use as much acoustic drums, there's a lot of digital tracks and things like that going on in drumming. I think you need to be pretty diverse in styles, not only just rock, but maybe if you got to teach a little hip hop, or you got to teach some jazz even to a high school student. So that would be very important, I think, in any teacher. Uh, and also just to have a curriculum, so to speak. What
Mhm.
things like we talked about. What books do you use? What methods do you use? How do you approach it? so you don't just get a student or two and say, hey, what do you want to do? I mean, you need to be in control. You're a teacher, you're an educator, and you also need to be able to play and back up, what you teach. So being diverse, and also I think just being like super prepared.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
That's great.
makes sense.
It does, Rob. It really does. And on a personal note, thank you for all the great drum lessons that you gave me, and all the times I'd come into Crescendo, or I would call you at Crescendo and go, "Hey, how much would this drum set cost me?" And
That's great. Now, you've brought back a lot of great memories, and I'd have to say you are definitely my star student from those days. I
oh, thank you.
honestly don't think I could tell you what any of the other ones are doing these days. So it's been great to reconnect with you, Bart.
Oh, it's been fantastic for me too, Rob. I remember when Kim Graham, uh, brought us together again at NAM that one year at the Gretsch booth. That was great. You know what? And I blew it because it's out in the garage. I still have, this is no joke. I'll post a picture of it. I actually did a while ago. I still have a snare drum case that I got from Crescendo Music. And it's got like a million stickers on it. That case has been everywhere. And if memory serves me correct, it came with the very first snare drum that my mom
Yeah,
bought. I still got, it's an old hard shell, like cardboard case. I still have
right.
it.
You had the little slot in the side for the snare stand.
Yeah, yeah, I've still got it. It's holding together.
You did post that, and I think I reminded you that you still owe me $20 for that.
Probably, you know what? I'll Venmo you the money right now as soon as we
No,
get
no,
off.
no, no, it's all good. You've taken ownership of that one.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it. Rob, listen, this has been awesome, buddy. We're going to get off the recording right now. Everybody, please, thank you so much for watching this. Please follow us at the Drummers Education Network on YouTube and on Facebook. And Rob, this has been awesome. Thank you, and the best of luck to you in Two Cobb Drum Studios.
Thank you so much, Bart.
You bet.